Hey, everybody, and welcome to another exciting midweek episode of The Back Room. Very exciting. Today we have Congressman Pat Ryan of New York's 18th District coming in to the back room. I mean, we're not doing any Zoom thing today. We got the man in the back room. So that's going to be very exciting. We're going to get to Pat in just a couple of minutes. This episode is probably going to post in about 2 or 3 days. So a couple of things we're going to talk about right now might actually age out by then. Probably not, but then there might be some new stuff by then too, which we didn't have a chance to talk about. But so the last 24 hours or so, there was some interesting stuff that went down. One of which was, speaking of going down, they shot down another thing out of the sky, which they call a high altitude object. But this is the part that I love. Also, quote, a cylindrical and silverish gray vehicle or some kind of airship, spaceship thing that is the size of a car. Now, back in the day, we used to call those flying saucers. So, like, have we just been invaded? Is this World War IV?
Well, if you want to know, you have to go to conspiracy Twitter, where they are completely immersed in what we're never going to learn about.
Yeah, right. They're probably fishing like little green men out of the Atlantic Ocean right now, probably.
Entirely possible.
Yeah. I mean, what is this thing?
I mean, the best guess is it's probably a large drone, which was flying at a high altitude.
Right. And it's not been claimed. We have no idea where it originated.
Well, if it gets claimed, it'll be claimed as a weather balloon.
Venus, Pluto, Mars, maybe. Are we finally seeing Martians?
Well,
I don't know. It's something. Do you guys think UFOs are real? Like, do you believe in that kind of stuff? Outer space people?
I feel like it's too vast a universe for us to be the only ones.
Yeah, right? Well, it's kind of arrogant of us to think like we're the only. I was looking at a planetary solar system chart with my 2-year-old grandson the other day, and I was trying to explain to him, and also his sister who's 4. And just when you look at it in a linear sense, you're like, no, we can't possibly be the only civilization. Maybe it's a different kind of life form, but
Well, I think you can believe in extraterrestrial life without necessarily believing that they visited us.
well, speaking of that, have you ever gone down like an Instagram rabbit hole? There's a great UFO page that I subscribe to. And there's things that's just like, and then you hear like these pilots like flying like Delta jets, airlines, and they're like, yeah, we're about to hit their, what was that, Bob? Oh my God, you see that shit? Yeah, I saw it. What the fuck was it? And like, these are not quacks. These are like pilots who have been flying jumbo jets for decades.
There's the video that was released by the Navy just 2 years ago, which showed very strange things.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious to see ultimately what gets put out by the government in terms of who or what this thing was. So I'm going to remain a little suspicious and conspiratorial.
Well, Harry Reid believed in all of this, and that's why he forced them to release that information.
Yeah, and you know me, anything Harry Reid ever said is the gospel to me, especially about sports. He was an expert on sports. We also learned yesterday that there's more classified documents floating around.
Really?
Yeah. Mike Pence's house, they found more at Mike Pence's house. And there's some new interesting stuff that was found at Mar-a-Lago. More like you said, Maddie, you
said laptop.
A laptop. Guys, are we still at 5 Republicans? Or
7.
7. For the 7 Republicans out there right now, I know you guys are obsessed with laptops. Okay? And so as you're pouring over the whole Hunter Biden thing, sink your teeth into this one, because I'm willing to bet you there's some awesome shit on Trump's laptop.
Can't wait.
Like love letters from Kim and Putin.
It is an aide to Trump. We have to clarify that.
We're a podcast. We could take creative license. It was Trump's laptop.
Do you think the P-tape's on the laptop?
Of course. Digital version.
I don't think we want to contribute to the new study that just came out that podcasts are completely filled with misinformation.
Trump, his aide. It's a difference. It's all Trump.
Potato.
Yeah, right. You say potato, I say potato.
Close enough.
So yeah, there's a Trump laptop out there, and there's more classified documents. And that'll be interesting to see because it just doesn't end. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I started searching my house yesterday because I felt like I got to have some classified documents in there. There must be something in there. So I haven't found anything yet, but I think it wouldn't shock me if I came across
Did
them.
you have your glasses on?
No. Oh, shit. Maybe I should have put it. I'll go back.
Are you saying
I'll
you
go back.
found nothing expired in any of the pantry?
No. For those of you who weren't part of the conversation before this episode started, these guys are teasing me because I ate 4-year-old oatmeal yesterday. And it's not a big deal other than the fact that literally for the last 24 hours, I think I've been married to a toilet. So maybe a little too much information, but we like to be intimate here in the back room with our guests and the hosts. I'm not joking, by the way. I literally just sent out like a flare for Imodium. And then, there's my other favorite subject who just keeps getting more and more fun every day, George Santos. So in the last 24 hours, we learned that at the State of the Union speech, George Santos said Arizona Senator Kristen Sinema came up to him and was very congratulatory and supportive and, just hang in there. I know you're up against a lot and I'm with you and I support you. And that was very cool, except Senator Sinema said, I never even spoke to this clown.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it is shocking. Even more shocking is that there's video going around now that Santos, I think he was on Newsmax, gave an interview and said that he exited his company in 2001. Problem with that is he was born in 1988, which means he was CEO of whatever company when he was 13.
Precocious bugger.
Yeah, but he said he was a child prodigy, I'm sure.
He did say that.
He's I don't know what he is. I'm trying to be kind here.
Child.
But we'll get into that with our guest, Pat Ryan, today, because Pat Ryan, as a congressman, he's lucky enough that he gets to work with all these people every day. And we're going to ask him about that. We're going to ask him, what is it like to go to work every day with a bunch of crazies? So let's get to Pat. He is upstate New York's 18th Congressional District Congressman. Pat, welcome back to the back room.
Thank you. I'm actually in the back room
welcome
for the first time.
Into the back. You're literally in the back room.
Yeah.
So now you get to go out in the halls of Congress and tell people what an amazing place this is.
People don't like the term back room deals in D.C. So
yeah, well, we have a back room. I don't know how many deals are going on back here, but maybe we can work something out. Maybe give a couple of VIP passes to the Supreme Court or something. We'll work a deal out. So let's get right into some national stuff, and then I want to talk to you about some local New York stuff. The State of the Union. What'd you think?
I thought it was great. I brought my wife as my date.
Oh, cool.
So there's always a lot of attention or questions of who are you bringing. So that was a lot of fun. Actually, it was the closest we get to date night with a 1- and 3-year-old is like these kind of events. But I thought President Biden was great.
Yeah.
The way he handled the, incredibly unprofessional and embarrassing feedback, shall we say.
Yeah. Is that what we're at now? Like, is that the new norm where like it's a WWF wrestling match going forward if it's a Democratic president giving a State of the Union?
I refuse to accept that should be the way that we conduct ourselves. So, and I talked to a few Republican colleagues who were embarrassed as well, but they need to police their own and actually create some consequences. And right now there's none. So,
but we've heard about that day or the day before that McCarthy, read his people the riot act and behave yourselves. Don't give them anything to sink their teeth into. Did that really happen? Is that logically believable?
Oh yeah, no, I think, leadership comes down to, you can have a title, but do you have actual influence? Do people want to trust you, follow you, listen to you? I'm certain he told them, asked them, cajoled them.
Yeah.
But you can see how much control he has over these characters, and it's essentially none.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love and most people love about the State of the Union is you can't hide. So when the president is speaking, there's 2 people behind him, right? The vice president and the speaker. And there was those moments where McCarthy was like, oh, geez. It just looked like he was like, oh, Marjorie, shut up. I told you not to do this. And it was like a rare moment where I kind of felt just a little sorry for him, but I guess he creates his own.
I feel no pity.
Yeah, I don't feel any
He
pity
has
either. I'm sorry.
created his. No, I appreciate the humanity and your.
I'm trying.
Your empathy, but
I'm trying to be
no, I think
humane here.
like what's interesting, and not to be too inside baseball, but the Democrats had the same margin for the last 2 years.
Right.
You know, Speaker Nancy Pelosi had the same 5-vote
Mm-hmm.
margin, and there's lots of disagreement within the Democratic caucus on a whole lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But her leadership and I think actually the Democratic Party's commitment to a set of values
Mm-hmm.
is what actually like holds people together. Whereas I think McCarthy is just literally about power for power's sake. And so when there's no values to like bind you together, you see everybody just devolve into doing whatever advances their narrow self-interest.
Right.
Whether that's wearing a weird white fur coat to and screaming.
Yeah,
at
I
the
mean, that
president, or-
jacket literally was worn by every hooker in every 70s movie. So
You said that.
and
You
it was
said
yeah, I said it. I'll take credit for that. And there's amazing memes going around of like you know her holding her mouth as she's shrieking and
The Cruella de Vil one's really
yeah.
home for me as a fan of 101 Dalmatians.
Well, the thing with her and Boebert and all those guys that they're not there to legislate. They're not there to hold themselves to a standard of decorum. It's all performative. It's all personal brand awareness. And so you can almost imagine McCarthy saying, just don't do any stuff, and them going, screw you.
Yeah.
Because that's what then they get to tweet about it
Right.
and raise money off it, et cetera, et cetera.
And to be fair, like it's actually and the media it helps get more eyes and clicks and everything. I mean, in the room, it actually felt less contentious than I think it. I watched some of it on TV. It felt actually less contentious in the room
Mhm.
because it's one voice screaming out. There's not like a camera in the room panning to that one voice. And I think that's actually sort of epitomizes or sort of a microcosm of our media ecosystem where the cameras are trained on the loudest, usually most disruptive
Mhm.
and often disingenuous
Right.
voice. Whereas, there's 420 some or whatever other people there that we might not agree ideologically, but generally I think like are there probably for mostly noble reasons.
Mhm.
So I think that is something we also have to figure out is how do we resolve that?
Yeah, well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And they know that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I notice every year when I watch it, which drives me nuts when it's like the room is divided and the reactions or whatever. But this year I thought, if you're a member of the working class, the middle class, seniors, college students, people who want to be unionized, like if you're on the fence about which party to vote for, all you need to do, you don't need to read a newspaper, you need to never watch Fox or see, just watch who applauds for what.
Yep.
Because literally, it's like, yeah, we need better health care. And they sit with their arms full. And we need, workers should be able to unionize, folded arms. And we should have clean air and clean water and lower taxes for the middle class. Like, they're not clapping for anything that is important to those people.
Yeah. No,
Why would that not be like, hey, wait a second.
Yep.
The Democrats are the ones talking about all the shit that I need, and they're like mad about it.
Yeah. And I think the president did a really good job just like kind of talking to the American people, like really talking about things that I think often the State of the Union can feel really disconnected and wonky. And I thought he did a very good job talking to issues that are actually affecting people.
And talking directly
day-to-day
into the
life.
camera to the people at home, which I thought was a great technique. He
Yeah.
seemed so prepared for that. Even the zingers and the dealing with the hecklers, like,
Well,
they finally prepared for that stuff.
Well, people forget he is a creature of the legislature. Like
Right.
I saw his energy pick up
Yeah.
when he was
He
able to
likes
go
that
back and
stuff.
forth and actually expose the incredible hypocrisy
Yeah.
and I think almost cruelty of these Republicans that want to get rid of Social Security, Medicare,
Mhm.
that have undoubtedly been on the record about it and now are trying to somehow, squirm away from it. So
Yeah.
we are going to keep on that over and over and over.
Well, Senator Mike Lee, he's like, what, cut Medicare? And then that video surfaces of him saying, I basically exist to cut Social Security and Medicare. It was interesting because the whole finish the job mantra was like, he's running. Like that's the basis of a campaign theme right there. Finish the job.
Yeah, I think the way I wouldn't have maybe, I mean, I'm not criticizing, I would have said it a slightly different way, but I think that idea that in the last 2 years, the Congress, I was there for the last few months of it, but the Congress passed incredibly impactful, big legislation on climate and lowering healthcare costs, on infrastructure, on a whole bunch of other things. But we actually haven't seen that make its way necessarily yet to people, like to your roads that still have potholes and, to your home that still has really high utility costs. So I think of my job really, and hopefully every member thinks this way, but certainly I do, like we have to get that to people so that they can feel and touch and see impact and feel some of the weight lifted off their shoulders. And so I always say, like, we have to deliver relief is how, that's like, to me, the operative 2 words is delivery, but recognizing how much pressure people still really are feeling right now.
That's a good point you're making, because I wanted to ask you about messaging. I think, and I'm very critical of Democrats just as much as I am Republicans, and at times I've been critical of Biden, but I got to say right now, my feeling is he's perhaps the most productive, successful first-term president so far, ever. Yet his polling is in the toilet. Now, we've seen polling the last couple of years, 3-4 years, that has been ridiculously inaccurate. So maybe it's chalked up to that. But how do you explain, as someone from the inside, this disconnect between his success and all the things you just mentioned and the bipartisan legislation in the face of unprecedented hostility and obstructionism? Like, how is that so disconnected from his popularity?
I think, I don't have the data in front of me, but I would guess any president that takes a big swing or a big series of swings and actually wants to really move things and change things experiences inevitable pushback, blowback, kind of sets high expectations and doesn't fully meet them. Certainly Obama did this with the Affordable Care Act. And then history becomes the judge. I mean, Obama's now one of, if not the most popular presidents in modern history. But if you looked at his polling numbers, I mean, the Democrats lost 62, I think, House seats in 2010. So I think in some ways, I mean, this is a weird way to think about it. It's like, if you've taken a big enough swing and it almost inevitably means you're going to get even more initial pushback. But then if you've done it right and got it pushed through, the longer arc of history will judge, I think, President Biden as truly one of the most effective, not only getting us through sort of the end of the pandemic period and all the economic disruption, but the bipartisan infrastructure law alone, it's $1.3 trillion to fix. I mean, we have water infrastructure in this district from 1887 in Middletown, for example. And it's, similar here where we're sitting in Rhinebeck and Rhinecliff. So like that stuff takes time to make its way to change people's lives. But I think we'll see that. And then the other just thing I would say on that is a lot of the punditry and takes have just been consistently wrong, especially the last few years. Like even in our congressional campaign last year, all the experts thought we wouldn't win. They told us to focus on different things than we did. And luckily we stayed attuned to listening to kind of people on the ground rather than the kind of polls and pundits. And I think Biden is really good at this. Like his focus on talking about democracy and threats to democracy ahead of the midterms when everyone said not to talk about it or that it wouldn't matter and criticized him for it, I think was a big part of why we did much better than folks expected across House races. So I think his gut is good. Like he's really connected to like working people, blue collar. Like I walked out and said to my wife, like, that's like working class Joe Biden. Like that was home run.
He even said, my dad said to me, Joey.
Yeah. And it's real. You can tell
he
it's
does that all the
authentic.
time and he's folksy and he connects.
Yeah.
But, there's a part of me that just wonders or fears, like we live in such a partisan toxic landscape right now. and everyone's tribal, and it's almost like the other side. You could tell them that Biden just found the cure for cancer, and their response will probably be like, oh yeah, great, he's going to put funeral parlors out of business now. Like, no, I just said he's found the cure for, like, there doesn't seem to be anything that is going to reach, whether it's 20, 30% of the electorate.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't know what is in their own best interest anymore. There used to be a time when a Republican could be like, you know what, I'm blah, 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 and then I'm going to vote for the Democrat now because I'm tired of. Now it's like anything that the Republican does, a lot of these people will accept, no matter how it impacts them personally.
Yeah, I agree. I wish there was an easy button to fix that. I do think it's somewhat cyclical in we're at a point of maximum polarization. All of our, I do think a lot of this, not to get too wonky, is traced to the internet, to social media, to the current even, broadcast media and print media landscape where like there just is no way to sort through anymore for people like what actually objectively how to think about things. So you just kind of pick a team and you sort of almost are forced to go with one side or the other. But a lot of my friends, especially people I served in the military with, to me are increasingly feeling like neither of those two sort of echo chambers are serving what they think they need and what they want to hear. So I hope that we can, like, we need to figure out how to shake ourselves out of this. I hope we can do it in a constructive way, but often in previous history, it's taken some huge external crisis, or God forbid, war or something. I was optimistic the pandemic might do that for us. Call me old fashioned. And
but look at all the conspiratorial
opposite.
crap that came out of that.
Yeah.
It just almost like exacerbated the lunacy.
But what I think, like, this is a point where real leadership could have made a difference. I think, unfortunately, having Trump in that seat at that time, where there was a real opportunity to unify the American people back to values of taking care of each other and doing things for the greater good and getting through a tough time. And he obviously doubled down on the opposite for his own self-interest. But as we're going to have, I think, more crises, maybe globally. I don't know how it pans out. But this is where we need leaders that can figure out how to.
So you don't think injecting bleach was a good strategy?
Not a doctor.
Probably not the best advice
confident.
From a president.
Yeah.
Like, that's not leadership in your mind.
Not
ultraviolet rays.
Not quite.
So to your point that you just made, all you have to do is watch Nepo baby Huckabee's rebuttal, right? It couldn't have been darker if like Darth Vader delivered it himself, right? And so you got, on the one hand, you have President Biden touting all this amazing stuff that's helping America. And then she comes on and it's just more poison, poison. And everybody wonders, like, why is almost half the country, or 30, 40%, why are they poisoned? They're just delivered this poison over and over. And this was like I mean, you can't get more legit than like the rebuttal to the State of the Union.
Right, that's sanctioned. That's not like a fringe.
It's not the Don Bongino podcast, right? So it's like, and even that was just so full of lies and poison. It's like, I don't know, it's hard to imagine that ever changing, because that's their strategy now. That's their path to victory in their minds, even though they've lost everything.
Well, and that's what I take solace in, is that it's not actually working, and that's not what people want.
Right.
And again, I try to, like, mostly speak the things I can more authoritatively talk about. And like, so our congressional campaigns, where our opponent was like about as dark and nasty and divisive as you could get. And it's tempting to try to come back at it that same way, but we really try to stay positive, constructive. And what really pisses me off is, in the same vein that the Sanders and others of the world are so negative, they still try to assert a hold on the flag and patriotism and being American. And I am this is like a personal mission of mine, to reassert that the Democratic Party and the values we stand for are the exact values that I believe our country were founded on, of selflessness, of taking care of each other, of those kinds of more humane and ideas. So I still am an optimist and believe that in the long run that
Yeah,
that
well,
works.
but if you look at like where we are today, if you go back, I don't know, let's go back 10 years, probably is a safe bet. When would a Republican be happy that the United States president practically blew Putin on stage in Helsinki, or that he has love letters from Kim Jong Un, or that he likes when people march up, the rioters storm the Capitol and beating the shit out of cops with the U.S. flag?
Right.
Like, this top of their skulls would have come off. Somewhere along the line, all that shit became okay. That's what I try to focus on. When and how did that all, is it really just Trump? Can we give him credit for all that?
Oh, no, I think it goes back to, I trace it to Gingrich and a lot of the 94 wave of just pretty transparently putting the pursuit of power ahead of all else.
But even when it
All else.
came to national defense and our enemies, like there still seemed to be that line. Like you could be crazy and vitriolic and all that stuff, but when it came to North Korea and Russia, those were still the enemy, and patriotism and the flag and blah 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 and defending the cat. That treasonous stuff, just like now it's nothing. Like you're a veteran. Like these people whose families are the ones who sent young men and women off to war, because it's the middle class that sends the soldiers, right?
Always.
Is that in their minds what they had their family members serve and die and get maimed over? To come back home only to support treason and insurrection? And it's just, I don't know when everything just turned topsy-turvy in that part of the electorate's minds.
Well, and I think we have not done a good job as Democrats of owning that space and not ceding that ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always baffled me. I mean, I would meet people and they'd be like, "Oh, you're a veteran, but you're a Democrat?" I'm like, well, yeah, like I literally signed up to potentially give my life to help other people, which I think is a pretty aligned with
Mm-hmm.
the Democratic Party kind of a value. And I actually had a borderline, sort of a near socialist healthcare system that took care of myself and my
Mm-hmm.
fellow soldiers. Not that it was perfect, and even now in the VA, I receive single payer universal care. Again, not perfect, but everybody gets access and coverage. So we just don't talk about those kind of things that way. And I'm still trying to figure out the right ways to use the right language. And I actually think one of the areas I've been thinking a lot about, which I know we were texting about, is like the moment we're at with the competition that's growing in the public eye with China.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a real actually opportunity to think about how do we reunify the American people and explain how investments in education and infrastructure and caring for each other and bringing good jobs back to the country are actually oriented around this growing. I think it's just going to be more and more public awareness. Sometimes it takes, I guess, a balloon flying over the country
or a flying saucer.
Yeah, to bring awareness to the growing challenges and competition with China. So still trying to think about, I'm still thinking about how to sort of articulate those ideas. But
Mm-hmm. And just a couple more things on the House before we move on. I told you the first time we spoke that you're a very affable guy. You got a perfect temperament for politics. I don't think I'd last 5 minutes. How is it like? What is it like going to work every day when the Marjorie Taylor Greens and Boeberts and Gosars and Matt Gaetz, when they have the same job as you, the same power as you, and they're off their rockers? Like,
Yeah.
Is it dispiriting? Is it deflating? Is it does it make you pessimistic? How does it impact your day when you're there as a serious guy trying to do a serious job and there are just clowns roaming around there?
Yeah.
Dangerous clowns.
Yeah. I try to recognize that as much as I disagree with them, they were duly elected by the same number of people in their district that elected me. And I think we have to start with some foundational level of maybe not agreement, but respect for the fact that is our system. And then how do we make it better? How do we help people see what's happening? I don't mean to sound, I feel like I'm sounding almost naive here, but I just think at the end of the day, they have the same vote that I do, the same, they may have a media, a microphone more so because of the media dynamics we're talking about. But I still have much more faith in people that they just don't actually want that in the medium and long term.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes you have to see the real ugly before you can.
So you're holding out
recognize-
like that you just might co-sponsor some legislation with George Santos, perhaps?
Well, Santos is like a red line for me. I mean, if you just lie blatantly, then that's just, I mean, I've been pretty strongly outspoken from literal day zero about that. And
Just in the last 24 hours, we learn. I mean, not that whatever we've learned about him before yesterday wasn't enough for a red line, but just yesterday we learned that he claimed. He said at the State of the Union, Senator Kirsten Sinema was very congratulatory and supportive. Whatever. She's like, I never spoke to this guy. That's number one. Number two, he said he left his company in 2001. He was born in 1988, which means he was 13 running a company. Like, he's beyond the pale.
Yeah.
Like, he's like a sociopath. But then, we had one of those guys in the White House. So again, is that the new norm? We're just chock full of, we're the electorate that you speak of. They're electing sociopaths.
I mean, honestly, like, we have to do better at making the positive case. Like, you look at what happened in Long Island and much of New York in these races. George Santos ran in 2020. He lost by 14 points in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And then somehow in 2022, he comes back and, picks up almost 20% swing. And a lot of that is because we didn't run good campaigns in New York State as Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't clear what we were for.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't organized. We weren't doing the work on the ground. I think we took for granted a lot of things. And so we have to take ownership of that, not just, I mean, I think he's just a total sociopath, obviously has deep mental health issues and shouldn't be in Congress, but we can't just we have to actually figure out how to solve these problems, in my opinion. So as I try to be constructive about it, like, there are 5, at least, House seats in New York that we should have won,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm very focused on us winning in a year and a half here.
Now, that was one of my questions. How did we lose those seats? What happened in New York, of all places?
That could be a 2-hour, multi-part podcast series. But I think, in short, we weren't clear what we were for. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think if you went around and asked New Yorkers, especially in the governor's race, what was Lee Zeldin for? What did he want to do? Everyone would have said, like, he talks about crime and safety. And I mean, it was a disgusting, fear-mongering,
Mm-hmm.
very cynical view, but it was clear what he was for, what he was going to do. If you ask, like, what are Democrats in New York going to do? I don't know that you would have gotten a clear set of 2 or 3 principles of what we're for, what we're going to fight for, a sense that we were going to really be about something. And so I think when you create that vacuum, and you don't give people that other alternative, it's really hard. So, like, in my race, we had those same dynamics and an opponent who was propagating that same fear mongering, but we were very deliberate about being for a set of things, particularly reproductive freedom and
Mm-hmm.
aggressive environmental and climate action and a real economic plan. And I think that gave people something to be for and to believe in. And we were going through we finally got final election data. We've been going through the data the last week or two. We earned a lot of independent and Republican votes.
Mm-hmm.
Because, again, I think if you present a thoughtful position with integrity that's authentic, which is probably the most important thing, that is what people want.
Yeah. Well, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, when he ran for Congress, presented the same, platform and campaign promise, and he was very popular, and he won. Which was a surprise to many people. You know? You recently were appointed you're on the Armed Services Committee now, and it was an important hearing recently. Want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I've been trying to talk more about defense and national security stuff because I think we don't talk about it
Mm-hmm.
enough, but talk about it from the view of how it affects all of us,
Mhm.
particularly how it affects my kids. So we talked a lot about China this week.
Mhm.
And there's a growing consensus, not just because of the whole balloon incident, but just among those that follow this closely, that the grave kind of risks if we don't manage the growing tensions with China the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And I describe it to people as I have a 1 and 3-year-old son. I believe they could likely fight in a world war, full on, like the likes of which most of us have never had to live through, and sort of my grandparents' generation did. If we don't get this right, that's what we're potentially headed towards. So it's like the seismic thing that's building. And so one of the main reasons I wanted to leave a great job in local government and work on these national and global issues is figuring out how to manage the right way and how to explain to people who are also dealing with a lot of other stuff in their day-to-day lives,
Right.
why this matters to their day-to-day life. So, I always talk a lot about not just the military competition with China, but the economic competition of the Hudson Valley in particular. We've lost out because most of those jobs have gone to China throughout my lifetime, and now we're doing the work to kind of bring them back here.
Who's moved those jobs out?
IBM is the big one in our
corporate America.
area. Yeah, exactly.
And who basically runs corporate America?
The Republican Party.
Rich,
right.
Old white people, right?
Yeah. So, and this is what frustrates me when we don't talk about it this way, is like, this was a set of deliberate choices we made in the 80s and 90s, mostly under the Reagan era, but many Democrats perpetuated into the 90s, and NAFTA as an example. And there's clear you just can't argue with the consequences and the situation that we're in. And I'm really proud that, like, in a pretty bipartisan way, the Congress took some of this on. The CHIPS and Science Act, which was pretty bipartisan, I think will go down in history as one of the most meaningful pieces of legislation. We're already seeing, like, we had the president come in September of last year and announce $20 billion in commitment from IBM back to the Hudson Valley in New York State, which is sort of like, for me, on a personal level with my family's history. My grandpa worked at IBM for 36 years in Kingston, just like a very powerful moment that if we make better choices policy-wise, it meaningfully for generations can sort of fix the situation that we're in.
But it was like what you were saying before, and gets back to messaging. It's like the Republican Party, the Huckabees, all these people, they're so good at poisoning their base to think like it's those scary brown people and black people coming across the border who are taking your jobs. But they're not taking their jobs. It's the corporate guys at IBM who are taking their jobs.
And I think
they don't make that connection. They're voting for people who are literally going against everything that's important to them.
I am guilty of this as well. I think we overthink and overparse in how we describe things. And at the end of the day, like, the way our brains work is like we need a sort of a villain in some ways to explain when things are changing or uncomfortable or we're mad or we're affected or we're hurt. And Republicans have been so good at disingenuously and dishonestly, but creating villains out of, frankly, the exact wrong people. But I think we're finally, as a party, actually getting better at not being afraid to say who the actual villains are, whether that's big corporate interests or, you would have never heard a president of the United States in the State of the Union slam the pharmaceutical industry and just be brutally honest about it. Not necessarily the people working in it, but just like the corporate motives. And I think Trump did that actually really well. And I think we're finally realizing his diagnosis was right. It's just his solutions were wrong and destructive. But I think there are constructive solutions to that diagnosis.
And that's another thing that at the State of the Union, when he's like, we got to bring down the cost of prescription drugs and bring down the cost of insulin, and the
Republicans
sit there, their arms crossed.
Right.
Like, you can't even clap for that.
No.
Like, don't you people have grandfathers? And like, it's just crazy.
But they don't write them, tens of thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Well, and that's my point. It's like, look at who they advocate for.
Right.
Talk to me about the SALT Caucus and explain that. And I know that's not about like the benefits of kosher versus iodized salt. So what's going on there with the SALT Caucus?
So SALT is like a tax deduction. It really comes down to back to the point of providing relief, which I think is like the main imperative that I have down there. This is a situation where this was a Trump era thing, part
Mhm.
of Trump's tax bill, that quite simply did huge, unprecedented tax breaks to big corporations. And where did that money come from? It came from middle class and working class people, specifically in blue states. I mean, he was open about the fact this was about punishing New York, California, Chicago, and other blue states. And what it basically is double taxation, where in the past, for 104 years, you didn't have to pay taxes twice. Like if you,
Mhm.
whatever your local tax bill was, you could write it off on your federal and
Mhm.
not literally pay twice. Trump got rid of that, or I should say lowered the amount that you could write off, to be more technically correct. And what it really did is just punish working people, middle class people, teachers, firefighters, cops, and really double extra punish blue states that ironically are the ones doing the things we want them to do, which are using those local tax dollars to invest in schools and
Mhm.
infrastructure. So the states that don't invest in their states are like being directly rewarded and incentivized to continue that bad behavior. So you see education outcomes down, you see buildings crumbling to the ground in Florida. It's just very cynical view. So this is actually a bipartisan caucus saying we need to restore this state and local tax deduction. It actually, you have Republicans and Democrats agreeing on this.
Mhm.
And basically the people blocking it are the Trumpy folks who just don't want to
Find
admit
the
they were
cure for
wrong.
cancer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only other argument is if you're from one of these states that has benefited from the system, then you don't want to roll this back. Because right now, New York, for every dollar New York sends to Washington, we get about 93 cents back in
Mhm.
federal money.
Mhm.
That other 7 cents is going to red states that don't invest. So we New Yorkers are not only paying to invest in our people, but we're actually subsidizing other states who are not investing
Right.
in their people. So if you're getting free money, why would you want to change that? So
Mhm.
I think this is something that we actually could get done in this Congress.
Mhm.
And I'll criticize Democrats here. We were in charge last Congress and couldn't get this through, which is very frustrating to me.
So let's talk about, good luck with that, by the way. That is important. Let's talk about Central Hudson, a local New York issue. I recently got a bill. I think my bill for January was like $428,000. So I'm exaggerating, not by much though. I think I used like 426 million kilowatt hours. It's only a weekend house, so I must have been doing a lot of drying and cooking. What is going on there? I mean, in all seriousness, I literally feel like they're pulling numbers out of thin air every month and going, all right, that's what we'll charge you this month. I called there, and you can't.
Good luck with that.
If you're lucky to get through to someone, and I'm sure there's some nice, smart people there, but it literally, you get through to someone, and literally you're talking to an absolute moron who doesn't have any clue what's going on. I was told my January bill was so high because it's an estimated bill based on last January, and I was like, well, okay, I get that. But how do you explain that my kilowatt hours was half last January of what it is this January? I'm sorry. They give you an answer that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And then they're like, all right, well, I'll bump it up to what is going on there? This is like over a year, 2 years now, right?
It's almost a year of documented issues and potentially more. I want to quickly defend the Central Hudson staff because I actually think
I knew you were going to do that.
No. I mean, I think, and I've been brutal on the company and the leadership and called for the CEO to resign, but I actually feel really bad for the poor folks that have been handed
I
this
give you that
mess, and like they're working overtime to try to fix the mistakes of the sort of corporate overlords that set up the system. So what's happening at the high level is what we were talking about before, which is there was a major acquisition by a multi-billion-dollar multinational company of Central Hudson, and just systematically over the last decade since then, they've underinvested in a whole bunch of things, including their people, including the physical infrastructure, as well as their billing system. What specifically happened here is they tried to move to a new billing system in August, and it was such an epic failure that I don't think they even actually know the scope of sort of the damage we get 10, 20, 30 calls a day of people's stories in our office alone of how screwed up this is. And I don't even think they can tell you. So it's just like a fundamental breach of trust. I think the only way to fix it is like they're gonna have to clean house at the top, bring in a leader who can actually understand and appreciate and take ownership for how systemic the failure is, and then get to work.
Well,
fixing it.
will there be that day where there is accountability and ownership? Will Mr. Ostroy get a check one day for like $1,800 because they overcharged me and they found it and blah blah blah? Will there be a reconciliation someday, or is this just going to be?
I think there has to be, and I think there's a few different ways that could. There's two specific ways that we're pushing for that to happen. One is there's a class action lawsuit, which is, I'm part of because I'm a Central Hudson customer, but beyond that, not part of. That will certainly come with some financial damages, and I think will prove effective. It's a long path, obviously. And then there's a push for what's called a prudence review, which is the next sort of step of escalation from New York State, where they could, if it goes fully the way we expect, they can actually levy financial penalties on Central Hudson that would ultimately serve as restitution to affected customers. So one of the things we're just really encouraging people to do is like really, I know it's annoying, but document and save your stuff now so that as this sorts itself out, you can have those records to sort of claim. That's a lot of what my office is helping people with, documenting that.
And is there a place if someone wanted to become part of the complaint community?
Yeah.
What are the best places aside from your office that you mentioned? What's set up to deal with this? Where people
it is a growing community. Yes. So our office can help because we have been doing this for a year and can help direct people. But there's the official oversight of utilities is called the New York State Public Service Commission. This is their legal mandate to hold these utilities accountable. They have an ongoing investigation. There are now over 12,000 a formal complaint. So you can just go online, fill out, it takes 2 to 3 minutes, fill out a form, and you join that official list of complainants there. On the civil suit, as a Central Hudson customer, you're already part of that. But we are also able, in our office and other elected officials too, Senator Michelle Hinchy and whoever your state electeds are able to often escalate and help break through the bottleneck in Central Hudson customer service if you have a really egregious issue. Like the mayor of Newburgh had a $700,000.
So I was not.
You like when you joked about that, I was like, oh, that's nothing.
You were like, really? Oh, I have to get on that before.
So yeah, I think I didn't take it lightly to call for someone's resignation. I mean, that's a pretty serious step that I wouldn't just do if I didn't think it was kind of the last option at this point to try to get this fixed. My biggest frustration is we all mess up. Everybody makes mistakes, but they have refused to take accountability for those mistakes. Like they double down on at this point just deceiving people and not taking ownership.
Well, it's hubris bordering on criminality, in my opinion.
And I think again, we can't let people forget that this is a deliberate choice. We allowed what used to be a much more locally owned, locally run utility get bought out by a foreign owned big conglomerate. And of course, the incentives change. Most of that company, or if any of them, have never even set foot here. So their profits and revenues, shockingly, are up, while everybody else is literally paying for that.
Right.
And so again, I'm glad we're leaning into this more back to the Democratic Party. But I've been talking with colleagues in other states, and this is one of the worst in the country failures, but this is not unique. And these mergers are approved by the federal government. So I think there is some real broader action that we need to take. It's sort of an antitrust, anti-monopoly kind of situation at this point that we need to dive in on.
Well, it's an important fight, and I'm glad you're a part of that fight and keep going. I know you've got to go. I did want to point out for the listeners, you mentioned before the 5 vulnerable seats in New York State. You tweeted about that, I think, last night or tonight in a fundraising tweet. So go to Pat Ryan's website, which is...
I think it's patryanforcongress.com.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you still had the For Congress in there. Now that you
well,
were in Congress.
we have our official. If you need constituent services stuff, it's patryan.house.gov is our official page.
Go there, show you love, drop some dollars, and
If you
help.
want to go on our That's not a campaign thing.
That's take those 5 seats back and then flip the House.
And like back to the first half of our conversation. I think the chaos of what we've already seen with the Republicans in charge from literally the first minutes trying to take 15 votes to choose a speaker is unfortunately going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And as the American people see that, I do think it creates more and more opportunity and impetus for change. So New York will be, we don't usually think of ourselves as a battleground state, at least on a presidential map, but for the House, we are either number 1 or number 2 battleground for the national map. So, I've got a hard race here, but there's at least 5 or 6, maybe 7 others that are flippable.
Well,
so if you're a New Yorker, focus on New York.
Yes. And we're glad you're in Congress.
Thank you.
Fighting for us.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. You've been very generous again with your time.
Yeah.
Glad that you finally came in and you saw this beautiful...
I had to see it in person. It's awesome.
Well, you'll come back again.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
Take care.
Right, thanks, guys.
All right. Well, before we get into the closing wrap up, I just want to say, in the back room, we always ask people about their top 5, who their top 5 musical artists are. And on the way over here to the studio today, I heard Sweet Cherry Wine by Tommy James and the Shondells. Really cool, trippy 60s band. And they're one of my favorite bands. And so I was like, no one's ever mentioned Tommy James and the Shondells. And by the way, Tommy James and the Shondells, Crimson and Clover, Crystal Blue Persuasion, I Think We're Alone Now, Mony Mony, Hanky Panky. I mean, these are some of the greatest songs. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Tommy James and the Shondells, basically because they're probably never going to get a shout out from anyone when we ask who the top 5 is. Well, in any case, that's episode 42. If you like what you've been hearing, and even if you don't, let us know. We appreciate the feedback. You can leave us a message at 845-307-7446. Send us an email at backroomandy@gmail.com or tweet to me at Andy Ostroy. And when you listen, please take a quick moment to rate and review because it's very helpful. I want to thank my co-producer, engineer, and editor, Maddie Rosenberg, associate producer, Jen, also known as Jenny Hamoud, Patricia Wind, she's only known as Jenny by me, Patricia Wind in the Epicurean for the Backroom Studio, and a big thank you again to our guest, New York State 18th Congressional District, Congressman Pat Ryan. So keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and we hope you'll join us again next time. Have a great week.